Right?
Okay. All right, we're going to get started. The camera's on. We are one shy of a quorum. I know Scott is on his way, so as soon as he gets here, we'll call the meeting officially to order. But in the meantime, we can go and kind of get started and go through the review of the agenda and then our commissioners' comments. And then hopefully by then Scott will be here for the minute approval. So we'll start out with the commissioners' comments, then we'll review and approve the minutes. We have parade permitting process from Sergeant Marsh is here to talk about that. That was one of our work plan items. The pursuit policy, Sergeant Williams will go through that. We'll have the chief's report, then we'll talk about the audio video recordings policy with Sergeant Williams. Scott will give us a community outreach update. Commissioner Wilde will not be here tonight for his honoring, and so hopefully we could get him in the next month or so to come back in for that. And so with that, we will move to commissioners' comments, and Terry, can I pick on you to start us out? We'll go around.
Sure, and then I will say I have nothing really to add. Not any comments.
All right. Well, last month at the Civilian Review Board we reviewed a case regarding a use of force where there was a deployment of OC spray, and it was deployed within about 10 seconds of contact, so people thought that was pretty quick. Was there an opportunity for de-escalation maybe, was the primary concern. And given where it was, a busy location, the person who walked across the street, there was some risk involved to that person and some others. There was a really brief interaction, and the OC spray was deployed in a short burst, controlled, actually gained control of the situation, and was probably safer for everybody at the end. That's where we landed, so that was good. There was a bit of confusion regarding the policy, and I think Sergeant Williams may be looking at it already, and that has to do with section 803.3. Policy states OC spray should not be used against persons engaged in only static resistance.
That's already been fixed.
But the policy goes on to talk about passive resistance, so there's a little inconsistency in the language. So we thought we'd pass that on.
Yeah, that was brought up in, sorry, I guess I'm just responding.
Go ahead.
That was brought up as part of the incident review stuff, and since we were just about to roll out the OC update that we just looked at, we got that adjustment made.
Awesome.
I think that was a previous conversion of languages that just didn't, somehow got messed.
Yeah. So that's all I have. Thanks.
Good. Silver?
No comment.
Sean?
I was excited to hear about the holiday party in conjunction with St. Vincent de Paul that some of the officers are throwing for Christmas and the holiday season.
No comment.
No comment.
Sergeant Williams, anything?
No comment.
Chief?
Is this my time or is this my comment?
No, this is just your
Oh, so I get
comments.
so I get two bites at the apple, then I'll just wait for my time then.
You can just talk about some random topic.
Just
at this
random
point.
topics.
Well, thank you everyone for coming tonight. I know this is a busy time of the year. I wanted to, just a couple things real quick, instead of taking another time, that there's some terms of commissioners that are coming up at the end of this fiscal year in June. Sean, because you were a replacement, so yours is coming up. Terry, Marty has resigned, and Scott. Just want to remind everybody, if you want to reapply for your next term, January 16th is when the application, and we do have to apply if you want to be considered again to be re-upped for that. You go through somewhat of the same process. The mayor still has to select you to be approved by the council, so it's still that same process. And so everybody else comes up in the following year of 2020. Okay. Good. So we're still waiting for Scott for the review review and approve of the minutes. So Sergeant Marsh, can we have you come up to the table and we'll talk about the parade permitting process?
Well, thank you for having me here tonight. This is my first experience with the police commission, so it's all brand new to me, so if I fumble a little bit, please forgive me. So, I was asked to go over the parade permit policy and how we administer that program. That policy actually hasn't been updated since the year 2000, so it's been quite some time. A couple of things that I've done, and it's not quite finished yet, however, is I've had Risk review it for the insurance amounts on the policy because it was, I think, $50,000 and $25,000, a really low amount. And Jamie Abo has actually been working on that, and I'm about done with that. One of the other things that they're looking at is they've sent the old harmless agreement back over to the city attorney to take a look at to make sure it's current and up to date and covers us the way it needs to. So with that, I'll kind of get into what we do and what the parade. Everybody in your packet has a copy of the policy. There's also a copy of the ordinance in here. It kind of defines what a parade is and when it's required by city ordinance. It's chapter 5, and then it's 5.500. Really what it boils down to is anytime somebody's going to have a gathering, it says 10 persons or more, requires a parade permit, but then it contradicts itself a little bit. It says that if it's parades of 100 persons or less who use the city sidewalks and avail pedestrian control devices don't need one. So by ordinance, that size group does not need a parade permit. However, there's a lot of times that they will fill one out anyway. And one of the reasons that I ask them to do that is it outlines their route, so I know where they're going to go. And it gives us an idea of kind of how many people are going to be there, the time frames and all that, so I can pass that along to the watch commanders or whoever's working on that particular day or night. That way they're at least aware of it, so they don't all of a sudden see a group of 75, 80, 100 people gathering and marching, and it throws us a little off guard at first if you don't know what's coming. We've been very successful in getting people to fill out the parade permits. In fact, there's several groups within the city, Indivisible Eugene being one of them, that whenever they're getting ready to hold an event of any kind, they call me and say, okay, this is what we're thinking, what do you think? And so they run ideas by me, which is extremely helpful from the planning perspective for us. And the benefit of doing that and the relationship that we've built with them is that even if they're just contemplating doing something, they'll call me and talk to me about it, which is good. That way we can work through some logistical things. Routes is a big one. The Women's March, they're very active in that. And if you remember, the first one was probably close to 8,000 people in downtown, which they didn't all follow the route like they were supposed to, but with 8,000 people, there's not much you can do there. So, and the next one was, I'm going to guess, probably 5,000 people or so. It was still a very large event. But prior to that, they called me and we sat down and we reworked the route multiple times to make sure it had the least amount of impact on the motoring public and the community itself. One of the things that I really try to impress on the people as they're talking about having a parade or a demonstration march or whatever it may be is that really be mindful and cognizant of what route you want to go on and how it impacts other people. Because if you decide you want to go down, let's say West 7th the wrong way, for example, obviously you're shutting down the entire city, and whether or not somebody likes what your cause may be, if you inconvenience them that much, they may turn against it. So those are things to keep in mind. And in the 4 years that I've been back on the team, I've only had one group that has refused to even have a conversation with me. Now, with that, we still did it like we do all other parades, and we shut intersections, and we just kind of directed them a little bit better so they didn't clog up the city too much. Currently, how it stands is when somebody wants to have a parade or a demonstration, they will get a hold of me, or they'll call the department, find out who does that, and it goes to me. One of the things that I've done is had the parade permit added to the website, so it's actually a PDF fillable form, so they can just type everything in. They can't email it that way. They have to copy it and scan it and email it, or they can just print it out, but they can type everything in, which has actually been helpful for me because a lot of times you can't read what people write, so it's helped me tremendously. And then with that, they have to provide the insurance information. And a lot of these groups, they don't have, they're grassroots organizations, they have no money. And so there is an oath of indigence, or essentially an affidavit saying that we don't have the funds to pay for anything. They sign that, get it notarized, and then it waives the insurance requirement for them. And the city ends up taking on that requirement. The parade permit itself is pretty self-explanatory. It talks about who you are, how many people, what time you're gonna, be there, your cleanups, the route you want to take. But again, getting back to the route, when we get to that point, oftentimes I'll have them come in and we'll sit in here and we'll go through, we'll pull up either a map on the screen or on our computers or phones or whatever, and we'll talk through the different possibilities for them. When we do that, especially for the larger events, I bring Public Works in because they are a huge asset to us as far as, the cones and the barricades and the signage and helping us getting things rerouted. One of the struggles we run into, especially on the larger events like that, is staffing. How do you manage 4,000 people with 8 motorcycles? You don't. And so we call in resources. Springfield comes over and helps periodically. We've had people from Lebanon, Coos Bay on the motors come over. We tap into patrol resources as much as possible. Our CSOs, basically whoever we can get that we can put at an intersection to help flag traffic to where it needs to go, so it minimizes the impact to the public and the driving community. Once we go through and get all that information, I'll sit down and I'll work with Chris Olson over at Public Works. We'll actually come up with a traffic plan for it, a traffic safety plan. It identifies, where the cones are going to be, where we're going to have police officers. And that's kind of an ongoing, a living document as we work through it until we get up to the event, because as we're going through, we realize that, okay, well, if we shut down this intersection, it's going to have an impact way down here, so we've got to rework this a little bit, and that's always a conversation I have with the organizers as well. As far as the kind of the direction that we take this and how I feel about it personally is that, look, everybody has a right to assemble and they have the right to protest and demonstrate. And we don't want to quell that at all or quash it. We want to, we're here to make sure it's done safely, really. And that's one of the things that I really try to impress upon the people I'm talking to is like, whatever your cause may be, it's not relevant to my portion of this. We just want to make sure it's done safely and you don't have a huge negative impact on the rest of the community that doesn't want to be a part of it. And like I said, all but one of the groups that I've dealt with in the last 4 years that I've been on the team have been very responsive to that, and it's worked well. Going through the policy a little bit, there's a couple of things that, and I don't know if this is the appropriate time for it as far as, it can be maybe rewording or reworking a little bit because it's so outdated, it doesn't really work the way it has it listed in here in a couple different spots. The application process, if you look at Section 3, it talks about the order of who it should be delivered to. But in reality, it goes to me, and a lot of times I'll just tell them to drop it off at the records section, and then they'll let me know it's here. There's really, I don't think, a huge reason for it to go to the Special Operations Captain, which we don't have. So, it doesn't make sense to have that in there. And then the on-duty watch commander, they're busy with patrol stuff. They don't need to worry themselves about this, but then again, this is my opinion. And then I always call them and set up a meeting and start facilitating the planning portion of it, which is, depending on how large an event, could be several months long. We've had, a ton of different major events over the last couple of years, especially with the, the women's marches, the March for Our Lives that the youth did back in March, the March for Science. You could list probably 8 or 10 of them that we've planned and organized, and that all actually falls in my office, and I'm the one that does all the planning, the organization for that. So, and then I think, then if you look on the next page, number 2, which is in the processing, I've already touched on that. There's no reason to send it over each time because they've already looked at it and we're updating the policy, and those amounts will be in there. So, those are just a couple of small changes that I would recommend based on our practice and how things are actually run at this point. So.
So I have a queue started and Steve is the first one in the queue.
I was looking at the ordinance, and it looks like it was enacted a long time ago as well. 81, maybe, 79, some section. I was curious about Section 5, where it says the chief of police will notify the applicant of his decision within 48 hours. And I was just thinking, like, depending on the complexity of the parade, that's an awful short turnaround to get all these things lined up. What would your thoughts be about that timeline?
That timeline is very condensed, obviously,
Yeah.
as you said. As far as, when I receive the application, I'll sit and talk to them, and I can tell you, I have not ever denied a parade permit application. Just because, again, I believe that it's kind of our duty to provide a safe opportunity for the people to assemble, and if it's a demonstration or protest or whatever it may be. So we actually do pretty much everything we can and bend over backwards to make sure that we can make it happen. The biggest thing for me and my perspective and from what I do is making sure that the route is appropriate. So when I receive them, I give them, as soon as I get them, I call them. And a lot of times they call me and I explain to them where to go to get the application. So if it's they shall notify of the decision, I don't know if that's an accurate representation of really what happens, and because that's, a lot of times they'll say, yeah, let's meet next week, and so then you've already blown the 48 hours out of the water, so.
So that's what I was thinking might
Yeah.
need looking at. And then the second question was, you said sometimes you need, you don't have enough officers to like support the parade, and you have other officers maybe come in and help out. Like, does the organizer bear any of the financial responsibility for that?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. It really depends on the nature of what the event is. And as the chief and I were discussing last week, is that if it's somebody who's putting together some parade or some big event and it's a for-profit, or they're there to, for their company or whatever the case might be, then yes, they pay for the whole thing. We charge them for everything on it. And if it's something like the Women's March, where they have zero money, you can only get so much cash out of a turnip anyway. So so they sign the not the hold harmless, but the affidavit, and then it's one of those things that it's part of our responsibility to make sure that we provide that for them.
Okay, thanks.
So I have myself in the queue, and I sort of have the same questions along Steve's line. So, we don't charge fees for this process, right?
No, the parade permit, there's no fee for it. It's just, you just need to fill it out, essentially.
Yeah. And so really, it's just the resources the department or the city works determines what they need, and then we just have to, if they can't afford it, we ask them to pay for it. But really, it's just a service that we have to provide.
Yeah, we don't have any control over Public Works and what if they charge or not. I know that we've had a number of discussions, I say we, myself and Chris Olson, about it would be nice if we could recoup some of the costs for these, Saturday and Sunday events that create a lot of overtime. But in reality, what it comes down to is where are you going to get the money? And if you don't have an agreement, they're going to pay for it up front. It's, I think the chief pointed out very well in our meeting last week that, if we price people out of the ability to have their peaceful protests and marches, then we're really stepping on their constitutional rights anyway. So.
Well, it also leads to people just then doing
Right.
a march or a protest without any of your input or any of your knowledge.
That's been my experience, is that generally a well-organized demonstration or march will happen regardless of whether you're there ready for it or not. And so I want to be sensitive to putting a price tag on what you would have to pay to actually exercise your First Amendment right. But also recognizing that from time to time, some of these things are anchored to a for-profit type of agenda. And that I don't think gifting of taxpayer dollars to a for-profit to be able to do their march or their parade is it's good stewardship of our dollars. So it really is kind of a case-by-case basis, and unfortunately, from time to time, it may fall on me to be able to make a judgment call on behalf of what we want to do and me allocate resources on our dime versus pushing a little bit to see if we can get some cost recovery from that. So there's not a perfect formula that it gives us the ability to say, if these boxes are here checked, then it's a yes, and if these boxes are here, then it's a no. There is some discretion that I'll have to probably exercise from time to time based on the totality of the circumstances.
No, and I just wonder if that's something that, and I don't know Sergeant Williams' calendar with policies, but maybe something that we look at, giving some of that in your policy, maybe that you can look at. But in general, we might have a statement in there that says that we're not going to charge for people.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Is to make a declaration about that kind of balcony level statement about us trying to support free speech in this community, with the caveat that gives me some level of discretion if I see something that's this is less about free speech and more about exposure so that you can make money.
Yeah. And also, I think maybe changing the title of this to Parade and Marches or Parade and something else, because I don't know, whenever you say about parade, I think floats and I think bands and where this really has to be more. It's about marches. It's about people making sure those kind of things. So sure. Good. Anybody else have any?
First off, I'd like to thank you with those organizing those marches. I was on the other side of it. I was helping with Indivisible, actually.
Nice.
And I can tell you that having them for free pays dividends in goodwill and in them coming back time and again. I did have a question about if we had any sort of risk analysis. I know with the insurance or some marches or routes might be more prone to backlash from various segments of the community. I was wondering what sort of risk analysis was there.
Yeah, whenever we have a planned event coming up, our Special Investigations Unit, they look into it. Because I know, like the March for Our Lives last March, they were very concerned about the potential for counter-protesters, especially in light of what was occurring in different parts of the country with people driving into crowds and things of that nature. So they mine all the social media and all the other avenues they have to see if there's any chatter about, hey, let's go do this or let's do that, or And so if we get any of that information, we address it prior to the event. So, and a lot of times the organizers, they have no idea that's going on, and I don't share that with them a lot of times because it's, if we've deflected it and it's deemed it to be safe and we've dealt with it, there's no reason to worry somebody else about it. But we do actually look at a lot of that stuff, especially on the major political hot button type marches and things that we have in the Eugene and all over the country for that matter.
You said that goes through Special Investigations?
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Silver next.
So, if there is talk of counter-protesters or violence, according to this policy that we have in front of us, you can stop the parade.
Correct. Yeah, I certainly could. And at that point, I would contact the organizer or whoever has been put in charge of the parade or march itself and say, hey, look, this is the information we've received. We think it's credible. We need to disperse everybody to make sure everybody stays safe. In the 20, almost 2 years that I've been here, we've never had really any credible information that there's going to be. Well, I take that back. When I first started, we were dealing with all the riots downtown. We had some of that information. But, in the last 15 years or so, we haven't had any credible information that we get, hey, let's go show up. But then SIU contacts them And no, and we're just gonna exercise our free speech rights as well, so. But yeah, I do have the ability to shut it down, especially, one thing to keep in mind also is when I go through and we put these traffic plans together and we run them, I'm actually the one that's on scene running the whole event as well. So I have, intimate knowledge of the entire plan. I've talked to the organizer multiple times, so we've built that relationship. And, and I've had them ask me, we've heard that there's some chatter about counter protesters, and I explain to them what I know. And then I'll also tell them that, if there's something that comes up that I think is a credible threat, I will let you know so we can deal with it accordingly. But we also have a lot of different police officers all over the place to make sure, and they're vigilant looking for things like that as well.
Anybody have anything else? Okay. Thank you, Sergeant. Appreciate you coming today.
You're welcome. Thank you. You guys have a wonderful night.
So now we do have a quorum as of 5:41. So if we want to take one step back before we go into the next one and look and review and approve the minutes, that would be great. So if anybody has any comments or corrections on the minutes? If not, I would look for a motion.
So moved. I'll move approve.
Okay, second?
Second.
Perfect. Okay, any other discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay. Okay, thank you. So now we'll move on to the pursuit policy. Sergeant Williams, you
Pursuit policy. So I went back and watched the police commissioner reporting from the meeting where this was brought up and what kind of precipitated this being called to the agenda. And it was Steve McIntyre from a CRB case that really is where the discussion came from. And I'm aware of the details of that case also, being that I'm kind of quasi-dual role a little bit, one toe into IA and the other 9 in policy stuff. And so we're able to really look at our policy. I met with Captain Klinko, who was present at that meeting, and we really discussed, because he made the comment or agreed that there was some confusion about the policy, particularly as it related to that case, and certainly the policy in general. And it's not really the policy in general. It really comes down to one section in the policy, which is where the confusion comes, and has been for probably quite some time, and is what has really created so much of the robust discussion each time we wind up with one of these incidents. And that comes down to 814.1.2 definitions, and that's vehicle pursuit definition. The rest of the policy is fine, in my opinion, in our opinion. It certainly is a unique policy that the chief at some point may want to look at, because there's pretty strongly differing opinions around the country around pursuits and at what point. And so it'll be interesting to see where we, at some point, if we do look at the rest of it for when and how and all that. Ultimately, what would be phenomenal is if we were able to come up with and work collaboratively with the other area agencies to come up with a policy that somehow met in the middle and we could have one agreed upon. And I don't know that that's possible, but I think that certainly would be something that would be interesting to pursue. And something I might start kind of poking out there to at least make in contact with policy folks at the other agencies. So with that, we looked at the vehicle pursuit definition, which is somewhat contradictory, and we basically threw it away, and we started looking for a new version. So in your packet, in the AIS, I think, is where it was left. I wound up with an unexpected trip to Texas all week last week, page 15, so one page before. So I didn't actually make the adjustment in the policy itself, and since it was just one section, I just had Jeremy attach it that way. So as of last week, this was our proposed new definition. Now, because this whole thing kind of came to me a little bit last minute, and with not a whole lot of time, and with scheduling other folks and the chief's time, and then me being gone last week, we've continued to tweak it. And I've got a version here. We really try to not throw new stuff at you, but since it's all of one paragraph, I figured I'd just pass these out, and so you just take one and pass them around. And it's really similar. It just kind of tightens up and clarifies even more. So we can take comments on what you guys have had and had the time to review, and then also take into consideration this latest round of tweaking that the chief and I feel a lot better about, even more so than what we sent you. The goal here, and the hard part with pursuits, is that, and what we really wind up getting ourselves wrapped around is the relevant traffic laws portion of the old definition. And when we're watching these videos, as we're reviewing an incident and trying to determine, it's at what is the first point of opportunity where this is turned into a pursuit. And that can sometimes be in the first half a second, and sometimes it's 10 minutes later that threshold gets met. But that really is the point. That's what this definition needs to be really clear about, is what is it that we're looking for, where we're able to determine this at this moment turned into a pursuit. Because somebody failing to yield, who's just not stopping, we don't really know. We don't know what their intentions are. We don't know if they've got earbuds in and they're rocking out and thinking about 10 other things, and they just don't know. And we certainly have had stuff on both sides. Or they're just like, I'm not stopping, but they just keep driving. But it's not obvious that they're just still driving. And so the language that we came from, and part of what you have is partially Lexipol, and some of it's me, and then we mashed all that up and made some more modifications. Really, the kicker that comes down to the new definition that is the heart of it that I really wanted to keep was willfully failing to yield. That determining the point where somebody is willfully failing to yield, that based on their actions we know they are eluding and evading capture, and that's the point where then we need to be considering this as a pursuit. And the rest of it really is setting the stage for what that looks like, and a little bit more background on how we determine that. That there isn't a set, like currently, the minute you violate any traffic law, speeding, or you roll through a stop sign, or you touch a lane line or something, that in our current policy, that's where we have told people, well, it turned into a pursuit there at that point, and now you're out of policy because you've continued 35 feet beyond the point that they violated a traffic infraction. And so what we need to do is really create some space for people to be able to identify, see what they're seeing, process what they're hearing, listen to the radio, drive safely while looking at everything else, let these 100 different things roll through their head, determine what they legitimately have, and allow some of that little bit of a breathing room for making that analysis. And so that's what we've tried to get to with this new definition, is allowing for willfully failing to yield, rather than somebody has violated a traffic crime while you're behind them, or traffic law. And so that's it there. Did I cover everything?
Very well.
Sometimes I talk too much. My wife tells me.
I'll start a queue, and I have Steve in the queue to start out with.
Well, I think it's really good work. I mean, I like it. It's a lot more clearer than existing. It's funny you stopped on the willful, because that's the actually part that bothers me a little bit. Because and when I see willful, like they're willfully failing to do something, do you have to know, like, their mens rea, like in their mind they were intentionally not, and how can you determine that? Do you have to have the word willful versus they're failing to yield, and based on the totality of the circumstances you believe they don't intend to comply? But the willful element, like, is a little bit troubling for me. But
So I would totally agree if we were talking about creating or charging them with a crime based on their mentality, but what we're looking at is for our officers, and as we're reviewing these after the fact, that the point, what we're looking for is behavior that's showing that they're intentionally, that they are meaningfully, that they are purposefully, willfully
Yeah.
doing something to avoid capture. And so it really is an internal thing where
Yeah.
we don't know exactly what their intents and everything is.
Yeah.
But if they are intentionally doing an action that is, so I think there's a number of different words you could use for it. And we're not talking about a criminal charge, we're talking about
No, but, no, I was,
at
that
what
word
point
is-
it's obvious that they are getting away or
Yeah.
trying to.
That's the part that kind of, it is used in a criminal context, and it is about their level of intent. So, you know, that's my only concern is
Okay.
it feels like you might have to get into their head a little bit, and I suppose you are a little bit. So,
Yeah, and I totally appreciate that, because in the criminal world, it's knowingly, intentionally, or recklessly.
Yeah.
You know, willfully is not in the criminal code necessarily, but again, I can see where I mean, there's many synonyms that feel that way. This is our threshold internally to that, you know, it's our element that we need, or threshold we need to meet, and ask and answer with regards to whether or not a reasonable officer, based on what we're seeing in the ICV, for instance, could come to the conclusion that somebody is intentionally trying not to stop or willfully trying not to stop. So, yeah, I want to be sensitive. I get what you're saying. It has a tendency to blend over to kind of the criminal code that we deal with. Yeah.
one other comment in a different section, and it has to do with the supervisor review. And first, I'll just say I appreciate that we'd like to try and have these done by the end of the shift, but I think that may be too tight of a standard in some circumstances, because maybe it occurs, 20 minutes before the end of the shift, and or maybe you're not going to be able to get the ICV and body-worn video or whatever uploaded in time to do that review. So I was wondering if maybe think about a word like preferably before the end of the shift, just to give some flexibility, because we should, I agree, we should strive to do that as soon as practical, but it may not be practical to do it before the end of the shift is all. So just try to see if you can find a little flexibility there.
I would have to disagree with that one. Only because as soon as the supervisor who managed that call was there on scene leaves, you don't know when they're gonna come back next. So it could be that they get sick or something happens, or, and you can't have these things just floating out there for 2 or 3 days. And so if there's a pursuit that happens, or an incident that could be that happens towards the end of the shift, that supervisor just needs to stay until they get that work done.
The best way I can explain it, and what we're trying to accomplish here, is understanding that the workload, there's different levels of workload that are really important, whether you're an officer or a supervisor, that need to be done. It's akin to an officer making a felony arrest and needing to do an affidavit and getting the reports done before they go home at that night, because there's an arraignment the next morning. This may be, in my mind, this is one of those threshold things that happens for a supervisor, that even if it means he or she have to stay late, that we need to make sure that those are buttoned up. We've had a couple in IA, and we've had these conversations, a couple situations where something has happened that should have gone into blue team, but by virtue of going on your days off, it doesn't happen for 72 hours. And so there's some question about the timeliness of what we're doing. And so, I would want to be mindful of the timeliness and the importance of that supervisor taking the time to make sure that at least, but to your point, yeah, you may not be able to get ICV, but there's an awful lot of stuff that can happen to start down that path, as opposed to just shelving it until you get back on duty and stuff. So,
Yeah, I was thinking at a minimum, you could start the blue team, for example.
for sure.
But may not be able to finalize it if you don't have everything you need. That was my only concern.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's all I
I'll put
have.
you in the queue, Sean. I put myself in the queue next, and then you, Sean. So, a couple things, and kind of just to go off what you're talking about, Steve. I look at which I don't think people really understand, but this vehicle that may be speeding down the street, whether it's the police car pursuing or the person getting away, is probably one of the most dangerous things that can happen in our city. Far more dangerous than an officer with his gun, because there's a lot of factors that you can't control when you're driving that car. So to me, I think that this has to be elevated to a level, not quite to that, but to that, when these pursuits are going, because basically this is a non-pursuit policy, in my opinion. It says, unless it's really serious, there's a felony being committed, we know for a fact that there's lives in danger, we don't want to chase that car at 90 miles an hour down the street.
Yep.
So I think that when we talk about that these things need to be reviewed right away, I agree with that, and we need to look at that. And the willfulness and the definition, I think, really is important, because that's where we're turning off the lights. And I always think about when I was much younger, and I was driving my brother's car, and it was a little sports car, and I was driving really fast. It took the police officer 5 miles to stop me, and I stopped at every light, and I kept going. He was behind me, but I was listening to music. I was only 18 years old. And when he finally got me to stop, because I finally noticed him in the back behind me, is that he goes, "What were you doing?" He goes, "You weren't running from me." And I go, "I just never saw you." He goes, I was following you for 5 miles. And you kept speeding too, that full 5 miles. So I was very consistent with my driving.
You were consistent, nothing else.
So, and I think that's where the willful comes in, because that wasn't I wasn't willfully trying to get away from him, but he knew he just needed to follow me, but we were following all the traffic rules, the two of us, so.
Except for you.
Yeah.
Except for speeding.
Except for speeding. But I think that's where I think that the officers have to try to get to that, and that's where I think that review process comes in, because then that can help them identify when that willfulness kind of comes into your mind. Because it is, I mean, these vehicle pursuits are where more people get hurt and killed innocently than anything that happens. So it needs to be kind of tightly controlled. So, good. Sean, you're up.
My thought was also on the willful nature, and I thought to how we would know it was willful. So, if they're obviously aware of an officer's emergency signal to stop, and they nevertheless seek to evade, that strikes me as a way to avoid the willful, intentional language, while giving officers some leeway on, well, maybe it wasn't completely obvious, or usually it's obvious or it's not in review.
As I think back on doing this for this many years, and certainly haven't been operational in a while, there are circumstances around every traffic stop. What we're talking about is trying to make a traffic stop. Mm-hmm. And there's circumstances around every traffic stop that when you as a police officer are ready to turn on those lights, you kind of know how it's going to go. If you're following a car that you've already identified through dispatch as being a occupied stolen vehicle, and you hit your lights, you kind of know what your chances are of this happening. And the minute they start speeding up, based on the totality of the circumstances of knowing you have a stolen vehicle and a driver who's speeding away from you, then almost instantaneously you're in pursuit. The tricky ones are the ones where you make that stop for no license plate light, or that you didn't stop, or you didn't signal 100 feet before a turn, or some of those things that you just don't know until you know. And those are the most dangerous ones, where we as police officers have a tendency to get a little bit complacent on some of those routine traffic stops, and you never know what you're coming up on. And so those take a little bit longer to kind of figure out what's going on. I'm just trying to make a stop for failing to signal 100 feet before a turn, but all of a sudden this is getting really wonky, and then you have to figure that out. So that piece of willfulness, you get that their hand gets tipped a little bit based on the circumstance, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So you can get to willfulness pretty easy based on based on the circumstance, bank robbery just completed, here's your description of your car, and you happen to be right behind that car, and your heart rate's racing and they take off. I mean, you pretty much know what's going to happen. So I don't think any of us are really hung up on the willfulness, other than the fact that internally we would look at all of those factors and come to a set of reasonableness about at what point would you know that they are intentionally, willfully, whatever word we put in there and doing that. That's an important threshold for us, because you understand that all of these things that we're going through may have, and especially from EPA's perspective, may have discipline attached. And so that we need to meet that burden of proof, really, to say, did this police officer reasonably know that this was intentionally, somebody intentionally not stopping or willfully not stopping. So that's why we get hung up on this, because it's not just about some of the community safety we're talking about. It's also on the back end of these reviews results in discipline of our employees. And we want to be fair to them too, and try and find a way to define what that threshold looks like, because there could be some significant discipline attached depending on how many of these you've been involved in. So I know it's a little bit of a moving target. It's a tough one. Yeah.
Is that it, John?
Yep.
Steve?
I agree with everything that's been said, and that may just be like a civilian perspective, a little different, so I appreciate that. I think the totality of the circumstances is what's really the most important piece to me, because it's based on all information you have at the time.
Yeah.
So that's the saving grace and all of that. I can.
Yeah.
Good.
After.
Oh, go ahead, Jared.
I was just going to say that's kind of covered because it's preceded, the willfully failing is preceded by whose driver is resisting being stopped by using high-speed driving or other evasive. It doesn't say or willful. We already know he's not stopping. So I think that's, it's in conjunction with he's already high-speed or evasive tactics, he or she. So it's...
Any other comments, questions?
Just had one follow-up. The thing, I'm not married to the willful either, because I think there's a number of ways that can be said. The thing that I did like about it is that it instantly creates a picture in our minds when you think of willfully failing to yield. It's what we're looking for is that the driver is making an intentional decision, and it just seems like what I liked about it was in 3 clear, concise, short words, it puts us in the mindset of what we're looking for. And so as we're looking at the video, it just paints a pretty strong picture of what we're looking for. And we know that lingo, that word, that for officers that's language that we are comfortable with and used to, and that we do know that it's a fairly high burden, which is part of your concern, that it creates this high burden. Well, how can you get into their head to know? But it also allows us to kind of create the picture of where we need to be. But I'm super open to other ideas.
And I think it's important when we started this conversation, what our intent was to do is, how do we make this simple for the officers?
Mm-hmm.
How do we get more consistent where officers can understand the policy? And so if the goal is to write this definition so that we can make it cop-proof, then that's really that. I think that moves us forward. I think that makes it a better policy when people better understand more clearly and concisely, without any ambiguity, what they're looking for, so they can make good decisions about either to continue or discontinue in this particular case.
And the officers to understand and follow, and the supervisors to apply in review, so that we're all on the same page easily.
EPA doesn't mind you using willfully or whatever thesaurus word you want to. Well, we get it.
We get it.
Okay, so I am still just a little bit unclear at this point whether or not there's a proposal for an alternative, or if we've come back around to being okay with it.
Your comment on everybody being on the same page convinced me pretty thoroughly, because as long as the officers in the community both understand all the words, I think that's good.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, fair everybody's okay with that change, look for a motion to
The little paper one.
the little paper.
The new,
change.
I almost printed out full sheets, and then the Eugene side of me was like, I just couldn't print out a full sheet for one
Thank you.
paragraph. So-
Thank you.
So moved.
Okay, second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Okay, motion passes. Thanks for quick work on that. We appreciate that.
You bet, thank you. Thanks for letting us not go through the full rest of it. Although at some point,
Oh, wait a
it's
minute.
it's gonna be due for that.
Yeah.
And it's a 2014, and again, like I said before, this is one that the chief should have a bite at to make sure that he's good with everything in it. So I would imagine that we'll probably be bringing it back to you within the next 6 to 12 months anyway, for reviewing any updates that the chief would like to make, so.
Good. Thank you, Sergeant Williams. So we're a little ahead of schedule, so the chief, I'm opening you up to 45 minutes for your report today. Just,
No, I want people to want to be on the police commission. I'm not going to do that. I will just take a quick minute and tip my hand on this. I was part of the crafting of the first and arguably the most restrictive pursuit policy in the state in the early 2000s in Hillsborough. And so you can expect me not to break this open too much. However, I was also a part of the negotiation in Washington County, and if you're familiar with Washington County, it's Beaverton, Hillsborough, Tigard, Tualatin, Washington County. We're in pretty close proximity to each other, and generally pursuits don't stay in your jurisdiction up in Washington County. And so we were able to negotiate a county-wide pursuit policy that we all adhered to, so that when the county was chasing somebody into my city, or Beaverton was chasing somebody into my city, we had some pretty clear rules of engagement and how we were going to behave in each other's city around pursuit policy. I would be a huge proponent of trying to do that, understanding we've got some significant challenges here that we didn't have in Washington County as far as alignment of policing styles. So we'll see how that goes. So, having said that, just a quick update. We've had some great community engagement lately. Your police department has been down at New Day Bakery and has engaged the community a ton. Most recently, this last Saturday, we did Shop with a Cop for the first time with 35 kids and their families, and the Police Foundation financed the entire thing, and we had 50 cops there shopping with kids and doing some great work. And those are the kind of things that your police department will continue to be engaged in. We see that every bit as important. It may not be enforcing the law, but it is law enforcement in the 21st century. And so we'll continue to engage in those types of things. Upcoming, we have some holiday dinner service that's happening at I think it's at the Lindholm Center up on 99 on the 19th of December. We're going to be serving probably about 300 meals up there and doing some of those things. So I think you can be proud of the fact that we're as good as we are at chasing bad guys, we're equally as good at trying to take care of our community from that perspective, especially around these holiday season. A lot of talk around the community safety and community justice. I know this board has been heavily engaged in keeping an eye on how we're doing that. Your chairperson has a seat at the table around the revenue strategy and some of the dialogue around how we're going to actually pay for what we're trying to accomplish. And so that's really encouraging to have that kind of touch there. In the short term, we have the bridge, what they call the bridge funding, which was the $8.5 million that has been dumped into the supplemental budget for this year, and we're getting started. Recently, I sent a very brief kind of snapshot to council about kind of where we're at. We've have interviews tomorrow. Actually, we have interviews tomorrow for our last CSO position. We have 4 out of the 5 new CSO positions already hired and in training. Those are the people that can actually go out and help with calls for service and start meeting some of those needs that we desperately need to meet in our community. And so we're really excited about that. Even today was a first chance to sit down with EPEA leadership and bargain some of the nuances around building a street crimes unit that is going to be able to be detached from patrol, not a part of handling calls for service, and actually go into neighborhoods and help solve problems. And so we're excited about that. Our first phase of that implementation, the target date that I've set with staff is March 1st, to try and have those first people out dealing with some of the things that we're not able to deal with because we're so busy on patrol. And then I guess lastly, I would tell you that we are making 7 job offers to dispatchers that will bring us not only up to full staff and dispatch, but in an over-hire situation to include the bridge funding for the first time in the history of dispatch, that we will be not only fully staffed, but plus 3.5 FTE there, which gives them much relief when it comes to the workload that they're doing. Have an entry-level position that started, a recruitment position that started last week, and we take the first 100, and we're building a situation much like the airlines do, where we're overbooking, knowing that we have people drop off, and we're creating a standby list for those folks that are looking forward to being a part of the organization but maybe didn't make the first 100. And be able to do that. And we have an ongoing process for lateral officers, recognizing that lateral officers, the timing is unique, and as we have lateral officers apply, we're very, very dynamic and flexible in standing up an interview process to try and capture the best of the best when it comes to lateral officers, knowing that they more quickly become operational and create opportunity to make a difference in the community more quickly than our baby cops. On January 7th, you have 13 of your newest officers headed off to the academy. I think it's January 7th, first week of January, headed off to the academy to start their academy training. They've been in pre-academy, and so Eugene is gonna take up about a third of an entire academy class with Eugene officers, and so that's really exciting about that. Tremendous momentum around wanting to be a part of the organization, which I'm really happy about, because we'll need to keep that momentum going into 2019, because we've got about 12 or 14 individuals that are eligible to retire in 19. And so if we want to try and make a net gain and actually get some things done, we have to be very, very aggressive in our hiring. We're expecting to try and hire as many as 30 to 32 officers in 2019 to be able to keep up with retirements and add the additional 10 bodies that we have in the bridge funding. So some good work being done by a lot of people. I've gotten working them hard, trying to meet some of these deadlines, and they're really, really responding well. And so you can, I think, at this point, feel good about our positioning and what we're trying to accomplish in this upcoming year. So, any questions I can answer, please.
Well, just a comment. I really appreciate the efforts regarding the lateral transfers, because I know that training is like really expensive.
Yeah.
Plus, you don't have a history with somebody.
Yeah.
So somebody's been doing it for a period of time.
Yeah.
You know, both of those things are shortened, and it's at a great
sure.
cost savings. So
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah, Steve, it's a unique, it's a kind of a good news, bad news situation. The good news I've found in all my years of hiring is that you're right. You do have somebody that can come and help us much sooner and less expensive than the brand new cops. The thing that I would point out, so that the commission has kind of exposure to, is that we also really, really closely scrutinize those that are coming from other agencies, because 7 to 8 out of 10 of those applicants that apply with other agencies that are generally running from something. And then there's a few of them that are coming for the right reasons. And so we're really, really good about making sure they're coming for the right reasons. So their backgrounds are very, very comprehensive, especially when they've been a part of another organization and they've assimilated themselves to that culture, that policing style, understanding that not all policing styles are conducive to the way we want to do things in Eugene. So we're really, really diligent about making sure that they're coming for the right reasons, and that they have the aptitude and the character to be the type of police officer that we need here in Eugene.
When you are recruiting officers, what are some of the biggest reasons for turnover or them not sticking around?
Mm-hmm. We generally don't have a lot of turnover with respect to, hey, I'm done the job for 3 or 4 years and I'm tired of it. Once they've been in the role, generally we have some good retention. When we lose officers, it's usually during the probationary period. And the largest, and one of the common themes that we have is, and this, I'm going to try to explain it the best way I can, that unique ability to be able to be compassionate and caring in one moment, and in the very next moment have to be heavy-handed to be able to keep yourself safe, your fellow officers safe, or this community safe, and use that reasonable amount of force is a tough switch for some people. And so there's been a few people that have struggled in probation where they have been shown a propensity to be unsafe and make their fellow officers unsafe because they can't do that. We generally, and conversely, every once in a while there's somebody that just doesn't have if I'm doing my job right, I'm hiring folks right out of the gate that have strong character and the ability to have empathy and compassion for people. The piece that doesn't get developed is that other piece where you have to be you have to be able to engage when it's time to engage. And when they struggle with that, we train them. There's been a few that we've lost with just the hard skills, for instance, in the firearms section. We have a whole generation of recruits that have had no experience with firearms, which is fine because we can teach you that. But that aptitude to be able to handle your weapon safely, be able to do that, has proven difficult for some. And so we train them and try and remediate them the best we can. But at the end, when it comes to risk analysis, and Gordon Graham is one of our great risk managers in law enforcement world, and what Gordon Graham would tell you is past behavior is a great predictor of future behavior. And so we have to be mindful about who we're putting out on the street that can't keep themselves and others safe. So those are some of them. The majority of them we lose in the first 18 months or so, which is really sad because you do invest a ton of money into them. But it really is more of a risk discussion at that point.
And for the lateral officers, want to track some hearing, send some away?
The majority of the ones that we're selecting usually have some family ties here. There's something about Eugene that has brought them here. Very few of them are just, hey, I'm tired of where I'm at, I want to go somewhere new. There's usually some kind of a nexus that brings them to either the Pacific Northwest or Eugene specifically, and I look for that because I think it's important to have that kind of support system around them as they start a new job. Oftentimes, and I meet with every either new recruit or lateral officer and talk to them about their family and how their family feels about moving out here because they need to have that support. There have been, I don't think there's been any laterals, with the exception of maybe a couple who haven't had that nexus for wanting to come to Eugene. So, but I think statewide there is, I hear through colleagues that there's a tremendous buzz right now around the Eugene Police Department and some of the things we're trying to do, and a tremendous uptick in support for wanting to do something to create capacity for this police department to be able to better serve this community. And I think that's got a lot of people excited. They want to be a part of that.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Anything for the chief? Thank you, Chief.
You bet.
We'll move on to audio and video recording policies. Sergeant Williams, you're back out.
Yeah, so this one is, compared to our normal MO of how we do these, this one's gonna be a little bit unusual as well, in that you'll notice that the policy you have is just the policy. There aren't any edits or corrections to it. And, what's that? There's no little, no, I've got no little strips of paper to hand out for that one. You're safe. So the story behind this and why this really just wasn't, we weren't able to essentially respond appropriately for being able to get a proposed new policy in front of you. What we can do is talk about it, and then as we go back to that process, then take your thoughts and concerns and suggestions back to it. Basically, the road that this has taken is that 14 years ago, probably 13 years ago, because I was a brand new graveyard cop when they started rolling out, we got in-car video systems. So we got our first legitimate fleet-wide in-car video systems. And so this was the in-car video policy. Then we morphed to where we had a handful of body cameras issued to downtown folks and some others, and so then we sort of incorporated body-worn video into this policy, and that worked for quite a while. And Police Commission, I would imagine, has reviewed this one over the years at different times. And then a year and a half ago, we rolled out the full fleet-wide body-worn video. And then that put us in an unusual place with our in-car video, because then we had two systems and we knew that the car system was getting upgraded here soon. And so Police Commission did review the body-worn video policy, which is what's out and we're adhering to with body video. And as part of that, we redacted anything that had to do with body video in this policy. And the long-term plan has been, once the new in-car video system was selected and we knew what that process was going to look like, we got them installed in the cars, we had the system worked out, then we would reincorporate them back into a single policy, because they do intertwine, and the way the systems talk to each other, they are intertwined and very connected. And so I picture the best way to do this is, now that we've pulled the body out of this, the body worn, that we're then going to push this back into the body worn video, and there probably isn't a whole lot of changes other than acknowledging the in-car and the operation of the in-car and how they work together, and when it's automatically activated and whatnot with how the new system works. So we're just not quite ready for that yet. The new systems are being installed in cars, but they're not, but not all of them. And with some staff changes here, this work just hasn't quite been done yet. And so that is, it's on the short list of things that needs to be done, I think. And we talked about that, I think, a year ago when we looked through the body-worn video policy. So that's kind of where we're at with this, and why it's just kind of an unusual. It's gonna take some creativity in blending the two back together again, and I still haven't really been briefed on exactly how the new in-car video systems are being worked, or how they work, all the functionality of it and whatnot. So there's just more to be done, and we just weren't quite ready for that. So with that, I guess we'll just kind of open up to thoughts and comments and what you guys think. It's really, really, really similar to the body-worn policy, even the new one that we have.
Why would we bring the two systems, the two policies back together? Because aren't they really different, the body-worn cameras versus the in-car systems?
Most
how they're used and
kind of, but no, but yes. They work in conjunction with each other, and so they will actually, so if I'm standing out on the street and a police car drives by with its camera activated, it will activate my body camera. So they are tied in together in the way they interact together. And while the body cameras do have a different set of criteria for when they need to be activated than the cars, the uploading process, the evidence retention, the back-end systems, there's going to be a lot of overlap for where the cameras are being activated and utilized simultaneously. I think the audio from the body-worn cameras gets connected to the vehicle system if they're linked somehow, I think. Don't quote me on that. So they are, while it is an extension, while they are separate, they're definitely connected, and it's an extension of a similar technology. You're not convinced?
well, I'll have to wait and see. It just, to me, I think that the body-worn cameras are so important today, and that having that separate policy of when the officers those are to be turned on and used, and when they're, only the certain times they can be turned off or muted. That I think that's more important than the car, but I'll have to see when they work together.
But most of those things are the same when you can turn it off or when you can mute it. It's not until the end of a contact or for tactical considerations or whatever. And so a lot of that, while it is important, it's also, it's not really a whole lot less important with our cars than the body, because they are capturing different views and different angles of things. And I think one way to look at it is that when you read this, you can see where we extracted the body worn, and there's not very many places, because so much of the policies really are very, very similar in when we want people using them and how they use them and whatnot. And if the police commission disagrees and would rather have two policies, then we certainly can consider that and see. I feel like there would be a lot of duplication with a few sections being different. And you know me, I hate having extra stuff.
Steve, go ahead.
Well, I like simple and I like efficient, so if you can accomplish that in one policy, then I'd be for it. I'll just give you that. I was curious on this particular one, though. Were you trying to remove any references to microphone? Because I see the struck throughout, but I see one that was not, and I didn't know if that was a typo or intended to be, or I missed or intended to be there.
That's a complicated question. Can you
Yes.
bring me to the...
So it's the last full paragraph on page 1. It's right in the middle. It says syncs his or her microphone to the video monitor. I don't know if that was a...
And then where was it left in?
No, that is left in there. It's not struck.
Okay, because section E,
Oh.
remote microphone is synced with the video screen, ICV systems only.
But I
So
see
then,
other where remote microphone is synced.
if 2 hours says the officer who syncs his or her microphone to the video should make contacts during the investigations. So, and I'm trying to remember, because this is one of those where we initially were maintaining officers to continue to use both, which included having a body camera and a microphone. And then the decision was made partway through to allow officers to not carry the microphone if they had the body cam, because we're still capturing the audio. And so that's what I'm trying to remember here. It would seem that that's probably a mistake in the microphone, in the paragraph, that I missed that in my redacting, and that probably should have been struck out also. I'm thinking that we'd made that decision to allow officers to not carry the microphones prior to this finally rolling out, and I don't recall for sure. There's a lot of discussion around that.
Anybody else have any comments on this?
That is not there will not be a separate microphone with the new
With the new
systems, and so
system.
that is something, anything that has to do with microphones or syncing, that won't be in there, regardless of where we land on this.
Anything else? So probably, it's not realistic to probably look at this policy again until end of year of 2020, by the time you get all the new stuff.
Look,
You've worked around the government for a while, haven't you?
I'm just trying to be reasonable.
No, I really,
Expectations.
no, and this is something that we had hoped to have done by now. But for a variety of reasons just hasn't gotten around to it. We haven't gotten around to it. So I would say that we will likely have this done sooner than that, but we'll, in our kind of planning meetings, we can keep that on the ticker and we'll work it in as soon as we really can. I would think middle of next year.
Okay.
First third to half of middle of next year. We'd be able to have this done for you. Now that we're rolling forward with it and we know what we have, we should be able to have a pretty good idea of how to write up the policy for it, so.
Okay. Anything else for? Thank you, Sergeant.
Thanks.
So we're going to move on to community outreach. Maybe disappointing, we may get out of here early unless Scott wants to fill the time.
Shouldn't take any more than 35, 40 minutes.
Perfect.
So a few months ago, we talked about our goal of 100%, and we had a number of commitments, and I'm not so sure we captured all of those commitments, so can you everybody see where they have it in their packet?
Yeah, it's on page 36 of your packet.
You want to make sure if you take a look there and see if we missed any of the meetings that you may have attended, and also if you attended any other associations or community events or anything where you were asked to kind of speak on the topics we talked about that we haven't captured up here, we'd like that data as well. So if you just take a moment and take a look, and I'll get with Marty and update his part, because I know he committed to a lot. It was there. In particular, the reds.
So red means we haven't had any contact with them, right?
Or that we've not captured the data yet, yeah, who attended.
And yellow means maybe someone went, but
Or someone said they were.
said it was
Yeah.
someone said that.
How I've got it entered is, red is no commitment from anyone
Oh,
as
this
of
one
yet.
has who we said.
No one has specified that they're going to that meeting. That's what red is.
Mhm.
Yellow is, we had a commitment, but we haven't had verification that somebody's actually attended
Yeah.
yet. And green is, we do have that, that validation that somebody has gone.
All right.
For me, for Good Pasture, I couldn't find on their website any indication of any future meetings or time frame to go to Good Pasture.
They might not be active right now. Harlow keeps having their meeting is right now. They've done that for 3 meetings now. And I
Same
keep-
time here as ours.
Which I keep telling them is not helpful. And then I am not on the schedule yet, but I talked to Northeast. They had the chief out, and so I think they're not wanting to have all their meetings about the police, so I'm gonna just keep bugging them. We should take Ed's name off of all the things.
Oh, yeah.
I got a few, I'm gonna update it here. And I'll do that off at our meeting next week.
Downtown neighbors. That's done.
So it would be nice to, on the bottom of our sheet that we had in our packet, is to kind of focus on some of those groups I think would be important for us to try to reach out to. So maybe what we could do is kind of focus on that over the next month or so of trying to get to some of these meetings. I know I keep seeing the first Friday Communities of Color group, and I keep meaning to get to it, and I just comes up and I end up not going. So,
There was pizza last time.
was there? That's my favorite Friday food too. Steve.
So on my list, I have the organizations. I wonder, do we have like dates and contacts, like how we can?
So in the weekly that I send out,
Yeah.
I put a link there to all of the meeting
Okay.
current timeline that's sent out by the city
All right.
manager's office.
Thanks.
Mhm.
I can commit to Calc, First Friday, Community Color Network, Integration Network for Immigrants of Lane County, and LULAC, League of United Latin American Citizens. Latinx Coalition isn't necessarily something that often meets. And Grupo Latino de Acción Directa of Lane County is not always meeting either. So,
So Silver, are those kind of groups that like Scott and I should reach out? Because Transponder was like that. And so we went and just met with 2 of their representatives because their community wasn't comfortable with us coming to a meeting.
yeah.
So we'd be happy to do that on some of those if that is a better way to do it, because we don't want to have a group that has us
The ones that I
uncomfortable.
mentioned wouldn't have any issue with it.
Okay, but should we reach out to see if they maybe want to at
I mean,
least
if you
get-
guys want to, I'm there.
Okay. I was just
This
thinking the
my
ones that don't
Friday.
have regular meetings, if.
Yeah, the ones that don't have regular meetings, I can reach out to them if you'd like.
Yeah.
GLAD and Latinx Coalition.
Okay.
But the other ones, I can do. I'm there anyways.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, so if you've attended any of these and any of your activities, please email me and then we'll update this list. And as you attend these, please email me, and that way I can update it with Jeremy at our prep meetings, so that we have the most up-to-date community association meetings that we're attending, so we'll capture that information. And if you have an opportunity that's not on this list from a different group, and you're attending it, let us know when you come back. Okay? That's it.
All right, anybody have anything else? Any questions for Scott or anything?
Can you scroll up a little?
Yeah.
Up, down just a little bit. Okay, that's good. Okay. I wonder if Ed.
Scott. With regards to Gausa, too, Gausa is mainly based in Salem, and they don't have any meetings down here. They don't have an organizer at this point down here, so.
Okay.
That's something.
Should we strike that one then?
We
you think?
should.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's strike that.
Strike. So,
Get an active chapter here. We'll add them back.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So, Marty's not here tonight, so we'll move to closing comments, but don't rush out after I end the meeting. Okay? So with that, we'll do closing comments, and we'll go this direction tonight. If you'd like to start, Sergeant?
Yeah, just a couple quick things. We went through our major final accreditation walkthrough review, and we're on track to have the accreditation renewed by the Oregon Accreditation Alliance. Yeah, I think at their January meeting when their board meets and votes. There's one very small piece that still needs to get tidied up, but otherwise we're good to go there. So that's been a huge project this year. And then drone stuff. We did find some good lights. So we've got red and blue ultra high visibility lighting, and I had intended on bringing one to let you guys see what they look like, but I'll bring that next month because they're kind of cool looking. That's all I got.
I don't have anything.
No?
Sean? Zoe? Steve?
You stole a little bit of my thunder, but I'm going to go ahead and say that Kyle has done a fantastic job on accreditation. I can't express to you enough what a heavy lift it is, not only to get accredited, but get reaccredited in all of the 104 standards that we have to prove to the Oregon Accreditation Alliance that we're, best practice in the industry. The evaluator is a former deputy chief from Salem and a former chief from Albany PD who now does this, Ed Boyd, who I know. And Ed took some time with me to let me know that that we're in the top 2 or 3 agencies in this state when it comes to policies and what we're doing and behaving the way our policies say. And he said he would come work for us in a heartbeat if he still had the energy to do so. So I thought that was a really nice compliment, because he sees an awful lot of the state organizations that go through Oregon accreditation, and so to have him say that. And so he'll be coming to council probably in February. They've got a nice certificate that they're going to present. We're going to do a little bit of stuff in front of council, and Ed's probably going to sing our praises in front of council. But just a real credit not only to the organization that I've inherited, but the work that Kyle has done. So thank you, Kyle, for that work.
Thank you.
On the way here, I wanted to see if there was construction on 105. It's still there. Apologize for being late.
Until 2021, I am.
That's it.
That's it?
That's apologize. Being late.
So, just want to thank everybody for coming tonight. I know this is a busy time of year for everyone, and some good discussion. And I always like when we improve and change a policy for the better. But everybody have a happy holidays, and thank you for coming. We're done.
Do you know if Ed Boyd